Welcome to this encore presentation of Catholic Answers Live. We appreciate you listening today and apologize that we're not here to take your live calls. However, we invite you to stay with us and enjoy the broadcast.
Stephanie Wood filling in this afternoon for Jerry Usher, who is on the road again. It's good, as always, to be with you, all of you Catholic Answers listeners. It's always a joy for me to fill in, host the show today. We have a jam-packed 2 hours in store for you. The first hour, our topic is the joys and challenges of family life, and we're going to be talking to someone who's a very special guest to Catholic Answers Live, but he's also very special in my life. We have my dad on the line today. Steve Wood is going to be talking with us about the joys and challenges of family life, and I invite you to call in not only with your questions for Steve, but also your testimonies and your stories about the joys and challenges of family life in your own family. And our toll-free number is open and ready for your calls all hour. That's 1-888-31-TRUTH. Again, that's 1-888-31-7884. And our phone lines are open right now for your calls. And then next hour, we're going to be talking with Anthony Bueno. His topic is the Becoming Marriage Ready. He's the founder of Ave Maria Single Catholics Online. And Anthony is going to be sharing with us part 3 of a 3-part series he's been doing on the show to Catholic singles specifically. So stay tuned next hour for an important show with Anthony. But first, we have a couple items to talk about. Today is Pope Benedict XVI's birthday. He is 80 years old today, so we want to wish our beloved Holy Father a very happy 80th birthday. And actually, if you'd like to send a birthday message to the Holy Father, you can do that by going to the Vatican's website, and they have a special page set up today to send the Holy Father a birthday message. So it might be a fun thing for your family to do tonight. You can log on to the Vatican website by going to vatican.va, and the Holy Father's birthday message page is right there on the homepage. So again, vatican.va for that. Also, many of you have heard the great tragedy that occurred today, the mass shooting that this morning occurred at Virginia Tech University in Virginia, and over 30 students have been reported killed already in this shooting today. I believe it's the largest mass shooting in U.S. history. So we send our prayers and condolences to all the families who have been affected today by this shooting, and we will definitely keep all those who are in surgery right now and those in critical condition in our thoughts and in our prayers. It's going to be a difficult week for those families, so please remember to pray for all those involved in the Virginia Tech shooting today, especially the families who are mourning the loss of their students tonight. So please keep them in your prayers. Again, our phone lines are open for your calls all hour at 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 1-888-318-7884. And it is now my great pleasure and honor to introduce to the Catholic Answers listening audience my father, who's a returning guest to Catholic Answers. Dad, welcome back to the program.
Greetings to you, Stephanie, and to all the Catholic Answers listeners, as well as I'd like to also express my happy birthday wishes to Pope Benedict XVI.
Well, he is 80 years old today and still going strong. I can't believe how much traveling and writing and speaking that he does, being at the age he is. He's definitely following in the footsteps of his predecessor, John Paul II, who was also so active in his ministry to the church. So it's just an inspiration to see Pope Benedict ministering so actively to us at the age he is. So happy birthday to Pope Benedict. Well, Dad, our topic today is the joys and challenges of family life. And just a little introduction to those who aren't familiar with you and your work. You've been married for almost 29 years. You have 8 children, and you have been involved in family life ministry for quite a few years. So just for our listeners who might be joining the show and maybe just joining Catholic Radio for the first time tonight, I just invite you to share very briefly your involvement in apostolic work to Christian families and Catholic families around the world, and then we'll launch into our topic today.
Stephanie, I noticed you were very diplomatic, and you didn't say specifically how many years to reveal my age to all the listeners online here. Actually, my interest in Christian family life started quite a while before I even became a Catholic. Our whole family became Catholics in 1990. Before that, I was a Protestant youth minister, and at that point, it really began to become apparent to me the importance of marriage for the well-being of Christian youth, and that as a youth minister, a lot of what I did was really, in a sense, a supplemental aid to what was going on in the family, or maybe it was kind of a Band-Aid to try to do some repair work for what was not going on in the family. But I saw very keenly that the family was the key to raising youth, not necessarily a youth ministry. That led me, as I became a Protestant pastor, to become interested in family life. It became kind of a very central part of my Protestant ministry. Kept studying and kind of pursuing that, and came to a crisis in my Protestant ministry, seeing that something was missing, and I found that missing ingredient when one day I sat down and read a document entitled The Role of the Christian Family in the Modern World by Pope John Paul II. And when I read that, even though at that point in my life I thought the Catholic Church wasn't a true church, it opened my mind and heart enough to see that the Catholic Church had it right on marriage and family life, and it created an opening to know what else the Catholic Church had to say. And when the more I learned, the more I saw that this was indeed the church that Christ founded, and that was in 1990. And since then, as I simply told my story, one thing led to another. We found ourselves starting an apostolate called the Family Life Center. And just a couple years after that, we started St. Joseph's Covenant Keepers because we discovered in Catholic family circles that there was a real need to have special outreach to the husband and father of the family. So we started that and been busy at it ever since.
That's right. I want to remind our listeners that our guest this hour is Steve Wood. Our topic, the joys and challenges of family life. And if you'd like to call in with a question about family life, about parenting, about raising children, as well as testimonies about the joys and challenges of your own family life, we invite you to call and talk to Steve at 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 1-888-318-7884. Now, Dad, with the work of the Family Life Center, and you also have started a apostolate within the Family Life Center umbrella called St. Joseph's Covenant Keepers, which targets men specifically, because I know that you believe very strongly that dads are the keys to family life and really making the home the place that it's supposed to be, the family as God created the family to be. So just want to give you an opportunity to share very briefly what you're doing with St. Joseph's Covenant Keepers and why fathers are so key to family life.
Well, we do feel that fathers are key for the spiritual life and well-being of the family, for the endurance of their children's faith through the turbulence of the teen and 20 years. And we found also that men are much more receptive to be challenged regarding their role if it's in a men's-only context. So I have a newsletter that's free, an e-newsletter that goes out to about 14,000 Catholic men in about 68 countries around the world. It's absolutely free. You sign up at our website, dads.org. We also have conferences where just for Catholic men. And again, men who normally might not go to a normal parish event nor go to a Catholic family event, surprisingly will come to one of these Catholic men's events. And we have our National Catholic Men's Conference coming up on June 9th right here in Greenville, South Carolina. We expect men to come from all over the country and even foreign countries to come, and we're inviting men to bring their sons who are 15 years old and up to join us for that conference.
Well, I know you have quite a stellar speaker lineup for that conference as well. I know Jesse Romero is going to be there, and Curtis Martin, the founder of Focus. You've got NFL quarterback Rick Strom coming, and also Senator Sam Brownback, senator from Kansas, all going to be speaking at this year's event. So again, that's dads.org, the website to sign up for the National Catholic Men's Conference. And talking about the joys and challenges of family life, Dad, let's take a minute and talk about some of the joys that are experienced in family life.
Now, I've come up with my short list, but I certainly hope our listeners can contribute some of their stories or some of the things that they feel as well, because by all measures, this is not a comprehensive list, but some of the bigger joys of family life I wrote down. Obviously, new life itself. The birth of a child is something that's celebrated not only by parents, but if they're siblings, by siblings, by extended family, of course, grandparents. And every time a child comes into the world, that child brings joy with him or her. And then right along with the birth, the baptisms, that the nice beautiful thing about Jesus Christ is that he's not too busy, he's not unconcerned regarding children, but includes them within his covenant family called the church. And so those children have the opportunity for the sacrament of baptism, that they might become a part of God's family through baptism in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And that's indeed a joyful time for all families. As your children get older, I think a true joy is to see your child successfully navigate through the teen and early 20s and continue in their faith as a young adult. And in this world, it's supremely challenging the way our culture basically attacks the faith of young people. And to see your children continue in the faith through their teens and early 20s is certainly a blessing. To see your children marry spouses who are strong in their faith is another joy of family life. I think in marriage, and there's a lot of joys in marriage, but one that sometimes I think we overlook, and particularly those maybe preparing for marriage overlook, but one of the chief joys of marriage is simply having that close friendship and companionship in marriage, that to develop that friendship with your spouse. And then there's a million little joys of family life, and I've just picked out one here. I remember one year, we were living in Florida at the time, going to North Carolina on vacation, and we had made it not even 100 miles before our air conditioning went out on this incredibly hot Florida summer day. And so we went about another 100 miles. We were all sweating and hot. And, Stephanie, when you and your sister Catherine were about knee-high when this happened, here you are with basically young children, babies in the car. I remember we bought you an ice cream cone and your sister an ice cream cone. And I remember sitting there, and this was definitely an uncomfortable trip, but this sight made it all worthwhile because you and your sister were not about to give up those ice cream cones as they not only went from your mouth to your chin and all over right down to the floor. And Karen and I just sat there and laughed and laughed and laughed at it was a stressful day, but, it just made it so much fun having kids, even in a hot summer day without air conditioning. There's a million little joys of family life that every family enjoys.
And if you'd like to call and share with Steve and our listeners some of the joys of your family life, our phone lines are open for calls from our listeners at 1-888-31-TRUTH. I believe we have just a couple lines open at the moment. Dad, let's talk about, before we go to our first break, some of the challenges of family life, because I know in addition to the joys that every family experiences challenges in their lives as well.
They certainly do, and it's part of life in this fallen world that there are going to be challenges. I think probably one of the biggest is when there's a death in the family. I know I lost my brother just at the end of February, and that's obviously a time of great sorrow in a family. I know also just last month some of our very close friends in Florida lost their 13-year-old daughter very suddenly in a horse accident, and I'll tell you, these two combined together were great losses. And I'm just thinking now of all those parents of those students who were shot today. I mean, this is a challenge for a parent. There's probably none greater than the loss particularly of a child, but any loss within a family, a spouse, your parents, your children, your siblings. It's an incredibly difficult challenge, and obviously, this is where our faith plays an incredibly huge role at this time. Right along with death, there's sickness, which can go on for a very long time. It's a challenge not only for the person who is sick, but for those caring for that person, as well as just simply the sorrow from seeing a loved one suffer. Something that we deal an awful lot with here at the Family Life Center, and this one isn't talked about a whole lot, but there's a lot of challenge and suffering and sorrow connected with various addictions. And I'm thinking particularly of like an alcohol addiction or an internet pornography addiction. And the reason that these are so challenging is that they're huge problems in and of themselves. They affect the marriage, they affect the family, but particularly so often with addictions, the family members suffer in silence. They're not problems that are often easily shared or you seek help for. And I remember, Stephanie, you and I did a radio show on the topic of pornography, and somebody called in after the show, and a spouse said, dealing with this is almost worse than death. And I noticed, you were very sober after that, seeing how deeply the addiction would cause challenge and sorrow. Divorce, extremely difficult. The lingering effects of divorce we're now finding go on for years, both the spouses and the children. Another challenge was a child or a family member turning from the faith, just the opposite of the joy that I mentioned earlier, seeing them continue in the faith. Mm-hmm. And also some things I'm kind of concerned that we don't talk enough about on Catholic radio and television are job losses and financial reversals and financial pressures and how that affects families and the challenge that is for families. And I'm not talking only about those who are poorest of the poor, which very often we do recognize in Catholic media. I'm thinking just your average families. A lot of times those families are only one paycheck away from a financial disaster. And sometimes when there's a job loss or a financial reversal, there's incredible challenge and pressure. And I would say to top it all off, this is one that it hit our family through Hurricane Charlie in Florida, is natural disasters. And right now, I can guarantee you, particularly in the whole Gulf region where Hurricane Katrina hit, those families are still going through enormous challenges. I just read within the last month an article that many families have not received any money from their insurance companies yet. And that means that there are thousands of families who can't begin to reconstruct their damaged homes. And talking about a challenge to family life, so we can't forget those folks as well. And I'm sure the list could go on, but I think your caller should have a chance to add to both the joys and the challenges.
Absolutely, and I believe most of our lines right now are booked with people who would like to talk to you, Dad, and to share their joys and challenges of family life. Our phone lines are open at 1-888-31-TRUTH. We're going to take our first break, and when we come back, we will talk with our listeners.
Catholic Answers Live. We're glad you're with us. Stick around.
As you study and share the faith, you need access to countless resources, multiple Bible translations, papal writings, council documents, the Catholic Encyclopedia, the Fathers and Doctors of the Church, Christian classics, apologetics, conversion stories, and more. Where in the world will you find all that? And if you did, how would you keep all those resources handy?
Exactly.
Relax, because that's all been done for you. Catholic Answers is proud to offer you the Faith Database, the amazing new study tool that's revolutionizing the way thousands of people learn and share the Catholic faith. Order a copy today by calling 888-291-8000 or by logging on to Catholic.com. With tens of thousands of dollars worth of resources at your fingertips, the Faith Database is fully searchable, meaning you simply enter a word or a phrase, and in seconds you have access to a wealth of information about the Eucharist, the papacy, Mary, the history of the Church, virtually any topic you have an interest in. You can bookmark your search results and return to them later, making your study of the faith effortless. Plus, you can download the Faith Database into your PDA so you can take the treasury of our faith with you wherever you go. For less than the cost of a tank of gas, you can have all this fully searchable information right in front of you. Why not get a copy for yourself and another for someone else today? Call 888-291-8000 to order the Faith Database. That's 888-291-8000 or log on to Catholic.com.
Attention singles, have you heard about the site that puts your Catholic faith and values first? CatholicSingles.com. CatholicSingles.com is a proud sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. You can find out more about us at www.CatholicSingles.com.
In the Catholic Answers discussion forums, you're free to let the world know what you think about practically any subject. That's because the tens of thousands of members are chatting about virtually everything. Not a member yet? Not to worry. Registration is free, and it takes about 2 minutes. Once you're signed up, you can jump into an existing thread, start one of your own, or just hang around and see what everyone else has to say. The topics are as diverse as the membership in the Catholic Answers discussion forums. Sign up or log in again today at Catholic.com.
Our family has spanned the centuries and the globe. With God's grace, we started hospitals to care for the sick. We established orphanages and helped the poor. We are the largest charitable organization on the planet, bringing comfort to those in need. We educate more children than any other institution. We developed the scientific method and founded the college system. We defend the dignity of human life and uphold marriage. Guided by the Holy Spirit, we compiled the Bible. We are transformed by sacred scripture and sacred tradition, which have guided us for 2,000 years. We are the Catholic Church. With over 1 billion in our family, sharing in the sacraments and fullness of the Christian faith. Jesus started our church when he said to Peter, the first pope, "You are rock, and upon this rock I will build my church." So if you've been away from the Catholic Church, we invite you to take another look. Visit CatholicsComeHome.org today. We are Catholic. Welcome home.
You're listening to an encore broadcast of Catholic Answers Live. We're not taking live calls today, but we're glad you tuned in.
Back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Stephanie Wood, filling in today for Jerry Usher. Today, our guest is actually my father, Steve Wood, and we're talking about the joys and challenges of family life. And we're now taking your calls. We'd love to hear from you if you have a question about family life or parenting for Steve, as well as your testimonies and your comments about the joys and challenges in your own family life. Our phone line is toll-free, 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. And we're going to go to the phone lines now. Our first caller is Sharon, calling today from Fresno, California, listening on Immaculate Heart Radio. Sharon, you're on the line with Steve. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Thank you. Yeah, I just finished reading Steve's book, Legacy, which I enjoyed very much. And I noticed in there that you recommended taking your family to either a traditional Mass or I think, basically you were saying the most reverent Mass you thought was better for the family. And our family attends an indult Mass, and I agree with you. I just wonder if you would comment on that. I mean, I sense that it's better for my children, but I don't know if I can articulate why, and I wondered if you could expand on your comment in your book.
Okay, Sharon, I'll give it a good try. That's a great question. The principle that I used in that section of the book, I got from the book of Proverbs, chapter 22 and verse 6, which says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." And I recommended that simply taking your children to the most reverent Mass that you can find is the best Mass for your child, much better, in my opinion, than children's Masses. And I'm not saying children's Masses are bad per se, but I think there's a certain danger in them, and it's this. Children at a young age are so receptive and will readily absorb whatever they're exposed to. And if they're exposed at a young age to, say, a Mass, a children's Mass, or perhaps a Mass where there's just kind of a lot of jokes and not a lot of reverence or this or that, children can very easily grow up and outgrow the Mass. And you've basically wasted their best young years for trying to instill in them what you want for a lifelong pattern of worship. And so that's why if you go to whatever would be a reverent Mass, and I included the Latin Mass with the bishop's approval, or visiting Catholic liturgy, or your local parish, but the one with the most reverent Mass is probably going to be the best one that your children will stick with when you give them the exposure in a young age. When they're old, they will not outgrow it, and that's the key to this.
Would your comments also apply to the teen Masses? I see so many families at the teen Masses, and I think, well, when you're not a teenager anymore, is it, are you going to outgrow that as well?
Well, that's a really good question. Steffi and I attended a National Protestant Youth Workers National Conference, and there was a young man there from the Gallup Research Organization, and they said that the chief challenge facing youth in America, Christian youth in America, was not what you do with younger teenagers, but how do you get older teenagers and those in their early 20s to continue all of that enthusiasm that they had in the younger teen years. And this same principle comes to bear. What might get all the excitement in the world out of a 13, 14, and 15-year-old could easily be outgrown by an 18, 19, 20-year-old college student, and so often the way they outgrow it is simply quit going. So, again, get the pattern established early, and God seems to indicate here in Scripture that when they're old, they're not going to outgrow something that's overly trendy.
All right, well, thank you for those comments. I couldn't agree with you more.
Thanks.
Sharon, thanks so much for that call. We have another line open now at 1-888-31-TRUTH for your questions on family life for Steve Wood. We're going to go now to Albuquerque, New Mexico. David is on the line. David, welcome to the program.
Hello.
Hi, David.
Yes. How are you? Thank you for getting me online or on the radio. I have a quick question. I'm recently divorced and annulled, and I'm a practicing Catholic again. My wife isn't, or my ex-wife isn't a Catholic, and she signed up my son, the 12-year-old, for DMLA, which is a branch of the Masons, and he wants me to attend his initiation ceremony. Is this something that's all right for me to do as a Catholic?
Now, David, I want to be very forthright. I do not know a whole lot about DMLA. I have simply heard about it, but I am basing my recommendation upon your knowledge that it is connected in some way with the Masonic movement. This is not something a Catholic should participate in. And I think that you can very gently say that, as a Catholic, you're not permitted to engage in this. You can certainly support your 12-year-old in 100 different ways, both before and after, and just express your exception here. And I don't think for the sake of unnecessary family frictions, just state your objection. The normal curious 12-year-old may ask the questions why, and then at that point be ready to express your beliefs. I think I've read in the Vatican newspaper just within the last month a statement from Benedict XVI that warning against Masonic involvement, and is not something that Catholics should be involved in.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your call, David. We have another David on the line from Plano, Texas. David, welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hi. My question for Steve, I've listened to your conversion story, and I read Legacy. I wondered if you could expand on, I'm in an interfaith marriage, and the wife is fairly hostile to Catholicism. I consider myself something of a revert. I wasn't living my faith until just really a few years ago when we had our first child. Do you have any advice, and what was your experience? I have the impression that perhaps you didn't encounter too many obstacles. Maybe I'm mistaken there.
No. Well, David, that's an excellent question, by the way, and it's twofold. If you would permit me just to back up, that anyone listening who's contemplating an interfaith marriage, I would recommend that you think twice, because it does involve further frictions in marriage. So on those on the front end of marriage, I do not recommend it. When we came into the church, my wife Karen and I had complete harmony in doing so. Our whole family came in. Some other converts did experience quite a bit of friction coming in. My recommendation to you, David, would be at this point, you're going to have religious differences, but you want to go to significant degrees to convince your wife that your love for Christ through the Catholic Church is not in any way a rejection of her or leaving her behind. And that can be a very delicate thing, because you're talking about two things very deep within your heart, your love for your wife and your love for your church. But to truly accept her and God is very patient with us. And here I was leading people out of the Catholic Church as a Protestant minister. And Catholics and Jesus were very gracious to me until I saw the light. And we need to extend great grace to a spouse if we're seeing the light, and you don't always get the light at the same time. And in fact, I just have on my desk, there's a new type of marital therapy. It's really not new. It's old as the New Testament, but conventional marital therapy at best is a 50-50 proposition of hopes for success. But there's a new marital therapy called tolerance therapy, where really then, rather than trying to arm twist and change our spouse, we concentrate on expressing our acceptance and love for them. It doesn't mean that we're happy about all those things, but we're truly accepting them and loving them as a person. And if that environment can be created in a marriage, they're finding that success rates jump from around 50% at best to 90%, which is kind of unheard of in marital therapy. So that would be the type of attitude that you would want to express to your wife. It's not necessarily doing apologetics battles with your spouse. I love to engage in apologetics discussions, but with family members, you have to be very gracious. You have to follow the Lord's timing as he gives light and opens your spouse's heart. And you don't want to preempt it, and God is a very big God, and he can make it very plain and obvious when it's time to move forward with answers and resources and invitations.
All right, David, I want to thank you so much for that call. Our phone lines are open for your questions and your comments for Steve Wood on the joys and challenges of family life. That number toll-free is 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 1-888-318-7884. Dad, we had a couple callers who called earlier in the show and were not able to stay on the line, but their question was similar. I think Angela and Ed both called in with a similar question about Catholic men and what to do when dad kind of checks out in the family life, either emotionally checks out or does not take up his role as the leader, maybe the spiritual leader in the family. And since you work so closely in apostolic work with Catholic men, I wanted to give you a chance to comment to all of our listeners and then specifically to Angela and Ed about what to do with dads who aren't taking up that role as leader in the home.
Well, I'll tell you, I think the best thing to do is to encourage in a very gracious way that man to get exposure to other Catholic men who will challenge him. And the very best thing to do is at a conference where you're basically face-to-face, and the book of Proverbs says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And you will find that men who are not practicing their faith, haven't been to confession in over a decade, all of a sudden, and I'm talking in a course of a one-day seminar, just have a complete turnaround because they've been challenged directly and forcefully by another man, but in a men-only context. That's the best thing to do. I'm not guaranteeing that every man who goes to a Catholic men's conference this happens, but we see this a lot. And, how do you get a man there? You don't, here, go there kind of thing, but this is a nice Father's Day present. That's why we scheduled our national conference the weekend before Father's Day, and doesn't mean you don't give them a fishing rod and reel either for Father's Day, but this is, on top of it. The second best thing, if you can't get him to go someplace, is basically we found the best way to reach a man is through CDs in his car or truck during drive time. In other words, take that man to him. And our website, dads.org, has tons of hours from live conferences and man-to-man talks. Those would be the two best ways that I could recommend. The same reason we have a website just for men, because sometimes they wouldn't go to Family Life Center to find out about their role, but they'll go to our dads.org website. Mm-hmm. So I don't pay all that money to have two websites just for fun. There's a purpose for that, and all of those resources that we've built up over the last 15 years are there for simply letting a friend or a family member know about them.
All right. We're going to go back to the phone lines. In Dallas, Texas, we have Elizabeth on the line. Elizabeth, welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hello.
Hi, Elizabeth. What's your question or comment for Steve?
Well, I'm a homeschooling mother of 8, and my 10-year-old daughter, who's the middle child, is extremely willful and stubborn. Frankly, I think I missed the boat when she was younger and have let it get out of hand. And I was wondering what Steve would recommend for helping this child to become obedient and respectful.
Okay. Well, you know what, Elizabeth? Some people don't think strong-willed children are daughters. They're only sons. But that's not the case, is it?
No.
Okay. Well, you know, I'm convinced that there's a lot of good that can come out of the life of a strong-willed child. So the first thing, and the reason I say that, Elizabeth, my specialty as a boy was being strong-willed. So God can get a hold of that will. He can use it. For instance, later in life, when everybody in the peer group is succumbing to peer pressure, it's going to be the strong-willed child that's going to stand up and say, no, this isn't what we should be doing, and stop the whole group from going the wrong way. So for you to get some hope that God's really going to use this will, do you understand what I'm saying? That develop a positive attitude, what we want to do is nurture it, direct it, bring it under control, but we certainly don't want to crush it because God gave that strong will, and He's going to use that strong will, provided it doesn't get out of control.
Right.
What I suggest doing is bring that child close to you. In other words, try to spend a little extra time, give a little extra love, maybe a nickname, a term of endearment. This child that, and what I suggest, this is how I would regard this as a father, is that the strong-willed child is just going to look to you for cues. And I'd say you're like a captain in a ship, and right now you're going through a storm. And the crew's going to look at you for signs of fear or things are out of control. And if you have that quiet confidence that, yes, we're in a storm, but this ship's going to get through it just fine. We have a goal we're going to, and as captain of this ship, I'm going to get us there. That's what you want to do as a mother, have that quiet confidence that we're going to get through this. And then, you know, go back to your standard discipline routines where you really work on saying something quietly, normal tone of voice the first time, and it isn't followed. You know, you have a consequence, that type of thing. You start working through consequences, but you want to go back to your basics. But you also want to have a confidence. You don't need to at all give up the ship because God made this strong-willed daughter of yours, and He's going to use her.
That's my hope, is that if we can channel it in the right direction, then she can use it for God's glory.
Absolutely, and pray for her.
All right, well, thank you very much.
And I'll pray for you.
All right, thank you.
Because it's not easy, but that's okay. Because you know, another thing, Elizabeth. Just sometimes children get it all out in the first part of their life, whereas a compliant child, perhaps in later 20s or something, all of a sudden starts going bonkers. You understand? There's that kind of internal getting rebellion or whatever out of your system. And for your child, it's maybe now rather than later. And maybe that's a good thing because you're with her.
Right. Well, we hope that's true.
All right.
Thanks,
All right,
Elizabeth.
well, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Dad, we're going to take our second break. When we come back, our listeners will be asking you more questions at 1-888-31-TRUTH. You're listening to Catholic Answers Live. Today, our guest is Steve Wood, and we will be right back.
From Ann Arbor to Austin, Catholic Answers Live.
As you study and share the faith, you need access to countless resources, multiple Bible translations, papal writings, council documents, the Catholic Encyclopedia, the Fathers and Doctors of the Church, Christian classics, apologetics, conversion stories, and more. Where in the world will you find all that? And if you did, how would you keep all those resources handy?
Exactly.
Relax, because that's all been done for you. Catholic Answers is proud to offer you the Faith Database, the amazing new study tool that's revolutionizing the way thousands of people learn and share the Catholic faith. Order a copy today by calling 888-291-8000 or by logging on to Catholic.com. With tens of thousands of dollars worth of resources at your fingertips, the Faith Database is fully searchable, meaning you simply enter a word or a phrase, and in seconds you have access to a wealth of information about the Eucharist, the papacy, Mary, the history of the Church, virtually any topic you have an interest in. You can bookmark your search results and return to them later, making your study of the faith effortless. Plus, you can download the faith database into your PDA so you can take the treasury of our faith with you wherever you go. For less than the cost of a tank of gas, you can have all this fully searchable information right in front of you. Why not get a copy for yourself and another for someone else today? Call 888-291-8000 to order the Faith Database. That's 888-291-8000. Or log on to Catholic.com.
Epiphany Funds is a proud sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Epiphany Funds is a Catholic mutual fund promoting the culture of life by investing according to the socially responsible guidelines established by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. The fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses should be carefully considered before investing. A prospectus containing this important information should be read carefully before investing and is available at www.epiphanyfund.com or through your advisor. Catholic Answers Live is grateful to Epiphany Funds for their support of our program. Matrix Capital Group distributes the fund.
Catch Catholic Answers Live anytime in the archive section of Catholic.com.
The Catholic Answers Minute. I'm Father Vincent Serpent. In Matthew 10:17, Jesus warned his disciples not to worry about what to say in the face of opposition. The Spirit of your Father will be speaking through you, he said. You will be hated by all on account of me, but whoever holds out to the end will escape death. Today we celebrate the deacon Stephen, who witnessed to Jesus. The Gospel says that his words stung his listeners to the heart. They ground their teeth in anger against him and rushed at him as one man. As he was being stoned, he prayed for them as he gave up his spirit to the Lord. As in the case of his Lord, his death was a triumph. Saul, who stood by approving of his martyrdom, was to become the apostle to the Gentiles, and one day to meet him in heaven. We Christians are not perfect. We are simply sinners who can be transformed by God's love. I'm Father Vincent Serpa for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
You're listening to an encore broadcast of Catholic Answers Live. We're not taking live calls today, but we're glad you've tuned in.
Back to Catholic Answers Live on this Monday afternoon. I'm Stephanie Wood, filling in for Jerry Usher today, who is out of town. Today, our guest is actually my father, Steve Wood. We're talking about the joys and challenges of family life. And if you have a question or a comment, and if you'd like to share a story about the joys and challenges in your own family life, our phone lines are open right now for your calls. It's 1-888-31-TRUTH is our number. Again, that's 1-888-318-7884, and we welcome your calls. We're going to go back now to the phone lines. Our next caller is Lisa in Phoenix, Arizona. She's listening today on the internet. Lisa, welcome to the program.
Hello.
Hi, Lisa.
My question is, and actually it's a challenge question. I have 3 little ones that when I attend Mass, they do not behave. I have a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old, and an 18-month-old. And I'm trying to keep them in the main church so that they can understand and see how everybody else, is quiet and listening. I don't feel that I should have to take them to the side room, to the chapel, to the crying room, because with the other kids in there, they just misbehave more. And by the time I get out of Mass, I am so upset with them, or I've stepped out several times with them to straighten them out. And, what other thing can I do to help them?
Lisa, let me ask you a question. This is a great question, by the way. Does your husband attend Mass with you?
Yes, he does.
Okay. What I would do is to put your husband in charge of the 7 and the 4-year-old, or ask him to be in charge of the 7 and 4-year-old, one on the left and one on the right, and then you take care of the 18-month-old. The 18-month-old's needs may be a little bit different and may need to go to the cry room on occasion, but not the 7 and the 4-year-old, certainly. And then what we did, and I recommend this fairly strongly, is you don't train your children to sit through Mass while in Mass. You train them to sit through Mass at home. And I would recommend that you have a short prayer time at home. And I'm not talking about something that goes on for an hour at all, but a brief prayer time where everyone learns how to sit quietly for that prayer time. And what we did is that if there was one really tended to squirm and all that, couldn't even sit through the prayer time at home, and they'd start crying or, reacting for not sitting still, well, we just hold them very gently through that prayer time at home until they finally calmed down, that this became a routine, and we found what we did at home then could be replicated during the Mass. And we also bribed our children, by the way. We used to have, if I remember right, ice cream basically on Sundays, Sunday lunch after Mass. And so that was, we were kind of mean parents. We kind of tied that to having, to get through Mass. And I remember one time, I know her mind should have been on something else, but one of Stephanie's sisters said to my wife halfway through Mass, "Do I get ice cream?"
Yes.
But at least she was trying, and that was the idea. And work at home, both before and after, a reward afterwards, a little training beforehand, and I think you'll find Mass go very well, and form a team with your husband. Let him handle those he can handle, and you handle one, and I think you'll find a lot more success.
Yeah, I think that's our bigger problem, because I'm having to tell him, take this one. But the problem is during the Mass, they all three end up where I am. If I have the little one with me, they're right there. And before you know it, I have one of them on my lap, or all of them are right there with me. And it's
right.
I have no break in between. But I also kind of feel, I hate that we're at Mass and my husband's on one side and I'm on the other, when I feel we should be sitting together and the kids around us.
Well, I must say, it prevents a lot of problems for children at a younger age to be on either side of Dad. When they get a little older, all of that can work fine, but it's really important to make a few sacrifices at those younger ages to make it through. Mm-hmm. And again, this is right in my book for Dad's Legacy, that this is not something to throw on your wife's shoulders. I describe a story in my book about the husband who seems to be totally unaware of this chaos going around 3 or 4 feet from where he is sitting.
Right.
That he's to be actively engaged. And this is the type of thing we try to do man to man, that this is part of a man's job, is to train his children, because by training them for Mass at a young age, you're really training them for eternal life in many ways. And also, a child who could sit through Mass, you find you can take your children a lot of places they'll get to go to that kids that age normally don't get to go to, because they've learned how to sit quietly.
Okay. All right. Well,
definitely
thank you.
Worth the training.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for that good question, Lisa. Our next caller is Christy in Golden River, California. Christy, welcome to Catholic Answers.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I had a question for Steve about if he has any words of wisdom for fathers who have just lost their children today in the shooting there in at Virginia Tech, and for the families of those children who attend that school that actually did not get killed, because I'm sure the whole families will be traumatized. Any suggestions?
Well, Christy, this is about as hard a question I think you could ever ask anyone. I know when my good friend, Dr. Michael Jakewith, lost his 13-year-old daughter, I told him, I can't even begin to imagine what you are going through. But I remember we went down to Florida for the funeral, and I have in front of me what Dr. Michael Jakewith said to those gathered to an overflowing funeral home about his daughter's death. And if it's okay, Stephanie, I think this is really, on a day like today, worth reading if we have the time. He said, if you scan the obituaries, it seems something oddly out of place. There's an entry for a 13-year-old girl. Maybe the numbers were transposed. Maybe this is some mistake, a human error. And then he said, God makes no mistakes. The obvious question is, why? Could it have been prevented? Could the paramedics, doctors, and nurses have done more? But the one question that lingers is why? Why did this happen? The first why begs for a second. Why did God grace this one family with such a precious soul for 13 years? Why did God appoint us as custodians of this radiant beauty? Mary was never ours. She was God's from the beginning and into all eternity. God created her for himself. He shared her with us for a time, but she was always his. We had her on loan. Mary taught us that a child is a gift, not a commodity. A third why comes to mind. Why did God create Mary at all? Why are we here? If you had asked Mary that question, she would have responded without hesitation, God made me to know, to love, and to serve him in this world and to be happy with him forever in the next. Mary not only knew the answer to that question, she lived it. She knew God. When God looks down on us, he sees works in progress. When he looked down on Mary Angela, he saw work completed. Mary accomplished in 13 years what the rest of us are still trying to accomplish. He called her home to himself. Well done, my good and faithful servant. And these were the words of a grieving father before grieving friends. And in fact, I have a letter that one of the other physicians in attendance who was struggling with his faith had his faith reawakened by hearing this father ask the question, why did this happen, which is always going to arise with the bigger whys and taking us back to God himself. And that's about as close as I could get for offering recommendations on a day like this.
Wow, that's so powerful. Thank you, Dad, for sharing that. Dad, we are almost out of time. We only have a couple minutes left. We have all of the lines booked right now with people wanting to ask you questions. I'm going to ask Javier's question. He was calling in from California today as our final question because, Dad, I think you might have some good words of advice for him. He's calling because his brother passed away a couple years ago, and his mother is still having a very hard time with the brother's death. And do you have any words of wisdom or advice for Javier for his mother?
Well, death is very hard, and the death of a child, it just doesn't go away quickly. And what he can do is simply be that quiet support and assist for his mother. But I know I just completed a newsletter today, a personal note reflecting on the two funerals that I've experienced just since Lent began. And my plea was that if any person receiving my newsletter, and this would go to any person listening to this broadcast or any family member of his and his extended family who's not living a life with Jesus Christ right now, the word would be, today is the day of salvation. And if you hear Christ's voice, don't harden your hearts. Don't be deceived by the deceitfulness of sins. The most important thing for a family member is to attain eternal life through Jesus Christ and faithfulness to him and to his church. Because family life, we can experience our love for each other in eternity, but we have to follow Christ in this life to have that reward.
Absolutely. Well, Dad, we just have a minute or so left, so I want to give you an opportunity to talk just very briefly again about your book, Legacy, because a lot of the questions that are waiting to talk to you are questions relating to raising kids, parenting teens, discipline issues, and I know you cover that in your book, Legacy. So just very briefly, tell us about the book and where your listeners can get a hold of it.
Okay. The book is entitled Legacy, A Father's Handbook for Raising Godly Children, and I wrote this book for anyone, including those raising my grandchildren, who wish to raise children in such a way that the faith will stick through the teen years, through the 20s, and not only just that far, but into the formation of families in the future. That's God's way of building families. It doesn't have to be something that just lasts for a few years and then falls away. And so I deal with the questions of fathers, how fathers teach the faith and what a difference that can make. Discipline questions, teen questions, media questions, training your child's ear for obedience the first time and how to do that. And all of that's available in Legacy, Father's Handbook for Raising Godly Children. That's available at dads.org.
Dad, thanks so much for being with us this first hour on Catholic Answers Live.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being with us today for this encore presentation of Catholic Answers Live. To learn more about our program, including upcoming guests and topics, our radio archives, and much more, log on to Catholic.com. God bless you.